Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfood, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En Route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Welcome to the Catholic Mama, where you'll learn how to deepen and defend your faith, find comfort as we share the vocation of parenthood, and learn how to raise your children confidently Catholic. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn. Let's get started. Hello and welcome back to the Catholic Mama. I'm your host, Christine Mooney-Flynn, and thank you for joining us on this episode. I am joined by two special guests today. I have Father Dennis Billy and illustrator Eileen Cunis here with us. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Thanks for joining.
Oh, it's very good to be here with you and Eileen.
Yep, it's a great blessing.
That's wonderful. I actually was just getting a chance to talk with Eileen a little bit beforehand and found out that you guys have known each other for quite a while.
Yes. We went to college together, and I think, Eileen, you and I were in the same dorm your first year, right?
Yes, for one semester.
And then Eileen's husband, David, who was a pediatrician, was one of my really good friends from college, and we used to study together at the Catholic Center all the time, play ping pong, and go to the Christian fellowship meetings, go to Mass on Sundays. It was wonderful.
That's awesome. And now just very few short years later, here we are.
Just a few.
Talking about what has brought you guys together again, which is this wonderful children's book called Jacob's Wood. So for anyone listening, Jacob's Wood came out just recently, right?
Mm-hmm. Within the last month, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Okay, so very recently. And it is this really beautifully illustrated and beautifully written children's book written by Father Dennis and illustrated by Eileen. And I wanted to have you guys on just to talk about the book. It's always interesting. I mean, I have three small children, ages 5, 3, and 1. So we're knee deep in books all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And just to talk to both about this, and we'll just talk about Catholicism in general. Why not? That's what we're here for. So I don't know, Father, if you wouldn't mind kicking us off. Actually, before we get into any deeper introductions, would you mind doing a short prayer for us as we kick off here?
Yes. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your many gifts. We thank you especially for the gift of life. We thank you for the gift of our Catholic faith. We ask that you deepen this faith and that you encourage us and enable us to use as many means possible that we can to spread the faith and evangelize those around us. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Father. So please keep talking and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm was ordained in 1980. I've been involved in teaching for most of my life. I spent quite a bit of time in Rome and in teaching moral theology and Christian spirituality, and more recently teaching in the seminary. I'm currently stationed in a retreat house in Canandaigua, New York, but I've been involved in spiritual direction and retreat work, and also writing a number of books. And this is actually something that I've been wanting to try for quite some time, to try and tap into the world of children, because, I mean, we're all children of God. Jesus says, unless you become like a little child, you cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. And I envisioned writing a book that would actually be read by parents to their young children. The idea that the written word, especially when it's illustrated so beautifully the way that Eileen has done, the written word can actually mediate a presence to the child. The written word mediates the presence of God through the parent and through the story which is told. So that was my inspiration. And then also this year on our retreat staff, we were giving retreats on the theological virtues, faith, hope, and love. And we used the image of a tree to convey these three virtues, the idea that the roots of a tree, which can go very, very deep down below the ground and soaks up the precious soils and foods of life, represents faith. and the trunk of the tree shoots up towards the sky, trying to touch the sky almost, and that represents yearning for God and hope. And then the fruits and the leaves, the foliage of the tree, the produce of the tree represents love. And so as I was playing with that image, the other image of the tree of life came to mind, which is present in the book of Genesis and is often connected with the crucifix, the cross being the tree of life as well. And so I started fiddling around in my imagination with the notion of a tree conveying the Christian faith. And the story went through numerous revisions, as Eileen can tell you. And finally, we came up with something that was very, very simple. And the way I look at it, and maybe Eileen can chime in here, I believe that I provided, in a very simple way, the narrative skeleton of the tale. But Eileen, in creating these beautiful pictures, she really gave the story flesh and blood and brought it to life. Do you want to say anything, Eileen, about that?
Well, thank you, Dennis. And I think this book is interesting in that Dennis consulted with me very extensively about the actual writing also, because it was his first children's book. And I've written a couple of children's books, only one published, but I also raised 3 children and I homeschooled my kids and just had a little more experience with the whole world of children's literature. So I think it was a very fruitful collaboration that we were able to really kind of uncover the true structure and the main thrust of the story before we even went to illustrations, really.
It's wonderful. And the illustrations do a beautiful. I'm looking at them now, and it's. I mean, Eileen, as you know, having 3 children yourself, having the images and the story, you need. The words are great, kids, but depending on the child, they might not quite understand every single word at first. So they really need to be drawn in by those pictures. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
Thank you. That's what we're looking for.
Well done. You got it. Eileen, you as far as illustrating goes, most of your artwork, it is religious, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so this is something that you've been doing for a long time anyway.
Yes, I just a little of my background. My husband and I married pretty much right out of college, and I actually did work briefly as a preschool teacher. But we started our family right away, and I stayed home with my kids, and we homeschooled. Artwork is something I've done all of my life, and I did spend a semester in art school. I studied art in college, and in those years of raising my kids, I continued to here and there do projects, but it wasn't until my youngest was probably in high school that I was able to return to doing artwork on a more regular basis. And so I have a little bit of experience. I for a while studied iconography and did some icons. I worked on a book of my own about the Eucharist, and I've done work for our parish. I've made banners for different, liturgical seasons and holy days. So really all kinds of things across the board. But always, really always with an eye to glorifying God.
That's wonderful. That's the best artwork.
Yeah.
So I remember I was actually, peeking around, Father, a little off topic, but it reminded me, Eileen, when you said that about starting a family young. Anyway, I don't need to actually go through my train of thought as I was thinking all this, but Father, you when you said that you were working the seminary, you were at St. Charles Borromeo, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, that's right. I'm right outside Philadelphia, so I'm close enough.
We're in Philadelphia.
I'm in Westchester.
Oh, sure. Yes.
And actually, I've never been to the seminary. My husband and our parish did a trip there earlier this year, and my husband went along for the ride, and said it was very nice to visit.
Oh, yeah, it's a beautiful spot. Yeah. I think Eileen and your husband, David, you visited me there, didn't you? Or
We visited you. Yes, we did.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm hoping they do another one of those little day trips there because it sounded really cool, but lack of childcare. And my mother-in-law went along with my husband, so that was like the one babysitter I could get. But
I have a cousin who lives in Westchester.
Oh, yeah?
Yes.
I moved up here.
Anita Buckley.
Oh, what's that?
Anita Buckley. I don't know if you know her.
I don't think I do.
Oh, okay.
I've only been here for about 10 or 8 years.
Okay.
So, but I worked at QVC for a long time, the home shopping. So if I know anybody in the area, if your cousin worked at QVC, then I might know. But Kathleen, so Father, you were a lifelong Catholic. But Kathleen, were you a lifelong Catholic, or did you convert?
I converted in my 30s.
Okay.
And it's neat that Dennis mentioned that we did both spend time in our Christian fellowship group in college. And that's where I really had my conversion experience and met Christ and became a very on fire Christian. So that's where David and I met. David had also grown up Catholic, but sort of was not really involved in the church. He kind of walked away from it, but had this born again experience in college. And so we married in that surrounding in our Christian fellowship, although we did have a priest present due to David's mother's insistence, which I look back and thank God that she was insistent about that. But anyway, fast forward, gosh, how many years? To about 1992, and we had several experiences in non-denominational, sort of independent little Protestant churches, and had experienced a lot of the rifts and this constant seeking to purify or find the right way, and churches would break up, or a group would start what they would call starting a new church. And we felt like we were kind of going around in a circle, and thought, gee, somebody must really know how to do this church thing. And in the meantime, David's sister-in-law gave us a wonderful book by Peter Kraft called Fundamentals of the Faith. And in reading that book, discovered that the Catholic Church taught everything that I believed pretty much. And by the time we got to the end of the book, Kraft explained, well, the church believes that she is the church started by Jesus Christ, and pretty much put down the book and said, well, that's where we want to be. We had been blessed with a wonderful love and devotion to Jesus, and we're simply on that road to finding the most fundamental and purest and simplest and truest way of serving him and worshiping him. So
that's wonderful.
Yeah, it was.
I converted myself earlier this year, so I've actually been. I converted from atheism, so I was very far away.
Wow! Yeah.
And so it's been about a year of me being Christian, and then even a little bit less of me being Catholic. Mm-hmm. So it's always interesting to me to hear either somebody who is a convert or somebody who grew up in the faith, because at some point you have to make a choice. Yeah. And if it's somebody who's been cradle Catholic and as they came of age chose to remain Catholic, that's always fascinated me. And of course, hearing fellow conversion stories is always something that's nice to hear as well. But Father, what you said that you had toyed with the idea, getting back to the book a little bit, you had toyed with the idea of writing a children's book for some time. Why was it that the retreat and that's kind of the symbolism really pushed you towards this, or was there something else going on? Like, why now for the book?
Well, it was something that was brewing for quite some time. I mean, for example, 20 years ago, I wrote a book called Even Today, Theology and the Inner Child. I think that there's something childlike within all of us. And I think when you come up with a children's book, something which is meant to be shared between a parent and a child, it brings out the children within all of us. So this is something that was brewing. We received copies of the book. We were selling it in the bookstore at our retreat house here, and I shared it with some of the retreat staff. I just read it to them, and it was beautiful to see as I was reading it to adults. They were all smiling. They were all just very, very happy to enter into this world of Jacob's Wood, and so I think it was something that was brewing, as I said, and it just seemed to be the right time. I had been meditating on the image of a tree, and then the image of the cedar of Lebanon came to mind, and that's the tree actually that I believe Eileen has chosen to use for the illustration. And so it everything has a time, everything has a place, and this was just the right time for me to attempt the story. And then when I had kind of like my first attempt, I was saying, well, where are we going to go with this? And it was through prayer, and I knew that Eileen was a talented artist. And I said to myself, well, why don't you just ask her if she'd be willing to work on it? And I did. I prayed about it, and I took the chance. And Eileen right away was very, very interested. And that's when the collaboration began, because it's very, one of the nice comments that one of the retreat staff members said was one of the beauties of the book is the way that the words and the images, they go together so smoothly. They flow into one another. They build on one another. And that was the result of the collaboration that Eileen and I had all the time. And I believe also that Eileen shared the story with her daughter, Erica. And I'm sure that Dave, her husband, went through it as well. And I remember Eileen and David, they visited me here in, I think it was late October. And they stayed the night here at the retreat house. And I remember one of the things we did, because we had it proofread, we had somebody go over it, and they had some suggestions. We went through it ourselves very quietly, and I believe we liked the way it was.
Yeah.
and we stayed with it because it really was something which it's a very, very simple narrative. It moves from word to image. It's very, very interesting. It's almost like I was thinking about this last night. In Catholicism, we're very, very much rooted in the word, but also very much rooted in the sacraments. Word and sacrament go hand in hand. In a liturgy, we have the liturgy of the word and the liturgy of the Eucharist. And in a way, you can almost say that the book is rooted in word, but also the pictures, the illustrations carry a sacramental meaning. And I think that that's very, very interesting. And I would also say that I was thinking about the wood. St. Bonaventure has a beautiful discussion about the human person being created in God's image and likeness. But God has also, in his creation, instilled vestiges of who he is in all of creation. And so the image of a wood, the cedar of Lebanon, Jacob's wood, it carries a sacramental meaning, and it also it carries a sense of God's providence, that God is present in all of creation. He moves providentially all of the world, all of the universe, and how Jacob sacrificed this beloved tree for his family, that simple act of self-sacrifice, and then the self-gift of Jacob of this small piece of wood to Joseph, Jesus' foster father. These carried meaning through the story, and we see that God the Father is following Jesus all throughout his life through this vestige which is graced in Jacob's wood. And so there's a lot of deep meaning in the book, but it's portrayed in a very, very simple way. And ultimately, what it tries to convey is this sense that God ultimately, his deepest desire, his deepest need, if you talk about a need of God, is to want to enter into creation and actually carve his name in the human heart and dwell there. And that's how the book ends. So it's a very simple story, but it's a story with a lot of depth, I believe. And the depth is conveyed through this very, very beautiful interplay between word and image, which I think is a reflection of the word and sacramental nature of the Catholic faith.
I could definitely see that as I was going through. Now that you're saying this, that helps bring an even deeper meaning to the book. I read it a few times already myself, and it's the words and the images go beautifully together, which makes sense if you guys were working on it in tandem. It wasn't just, hey, I wrote this, hey, okay, illustrate, and here we're just going to put everything together. It absolutely flows. But I think, and Eileen, I mean, you've read many children's books yourselves. I mean, I think the most impactful or beautiful children's books are the ones that they're not just filler or mental fluff. I mean, they really can express some very beautiful, simple truths. And if you can do it for a child, it really cuts to the heart of any adult as well.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's important to remember how those stories we heard or read in childhood stay with us. And even if I read this aloud several times to my 5-year-old grandson, who enjoyed it very much, and you really can't know what is going through his mind or how it impresses him, but you do know that a story stays with you for all of your life, and that it unfolds as you grow, so that there will be things about it that perhaps have a meaning to the child next year or 3 years from now or going on from that.
There's always something very hopeful inside children's literature, I think. Good ones, not just the silly stories that you can, get through in 5 minutes, but those ones that take a little longer. And you can always tell, because if a kid wants to read it again and again, there's certain books that I wouldn't, like, that we just have around that aren't flashy or too exciting, but they're when my son or daughter brings those books up time and again, you know that you've got a good one, because even if it isn't, I don't know, has textures, or look, I'm using that word again, Eileen, textures, or, sparkles on the pages. If they know that what's important.
Yeah.
Well, this book has been, I'm excited I'm looking at it now. So I love seeing all the pictures on my screen. So this has been a very, very nice just to look at, especially this time of year. It's the perfect time of year to look at this book or to buy it yourself. I will definitely put the link on how to buy it in the show notes. Before we go, though, I did want to talk a little bit more. This is a children's book geared towards bringing a greater understanding of the faith to children. But it's also, Father, like you mentioned, adults are smiling at it. What advice, especially as we get out of, we're coming out of Lent, the Christmas season, but between Christmas season and, I think I said Lent, Advent. Did I say Advent or Lent? But either, we're getting out of Advent, going into Christmas. And I was thinking about this for myself. This is, that there's that ordinary time between the Christmas season and when Lent begins, for families or even just grown-ups without children, but mostly for families. What advice might you have on how to continue any of the spiritual conversation or growth that families might be experiencing during the Christmas season, outside of, in between these bookends of the liturgical year?
Well, I would say the mystery of Christ's nativity, the mystery of Christmas, has to do with God's presence to the world. Jesus is Emmanuel, God with us. And so God for Christians, for Catholics, is not a distant God, but he is a God who wishes to be very close to us. And he's actually closer to us than we realize. And so my suggestion to parents is, as they raise their children, as they go through this Advent season and beyond, is image Christ by being present to your children. And that means spending time with them. It means listening to them. It means being with them. It means doing very simple things like reading to them and entering into a story with them, just as God entered into our human history. Enter into the history of your child. Be present to your child. Do things with your child. Show that you love them. And in the end, that's what they're going to remember. If they know that you love them, then all the difficult times ahead, all the suffering that is no doubt going to be ahead in their lives, will have meaning and will have deep relevance and significance for them, because they know they have been loved by their parents, and they know that they have been loved by God, who is present to them as Emmanuel. So that would be my suggestion.
Great. Eileen, do you have anything to add to that? I mean, as a mother and grandmother?
I would just say, this may sound like an odd suggestion, but I would like to do away with the term ordinary time. I think the church calendar did not always have a time called ordinary time. Every Sunday, we hear some story about Jesus, and there's nothing ever ordinary about Jesus in the world and in our lives. And there is every week, every day, there's a scripture reading that somehow discloses an adventure, a wonderful extraordinariness about the Christian life. And I think if we look for that and are aware of it, and can convey that kind of adventure in our home life with our children, that it's never ordinary.
That's interesting. That's a good thought. Absolutely is not ordinary. As I with my children, I noticed they are natural philosophers. So they actually pay attention in Mass, and they have the best questions afterwards. And this is all new and exciting for them. I mean, even just everyday life is exciting. The fact that crocodiles is exciting. So there isn't anything that should be ordinary about Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Well, I want to thank you both for joining me and talking about Jacob's Wood. Again, the writing is wonderful. I love that, Father, you mentioned earlier that, God is present and working in ways that we may not be able to see, but he's in everything. And you get to see that in a more tangible way with the traveling along with the tree as it goes on its various ends. But this has been a really interesting story to read and beautiful to look at. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. I will, I'll put anything in the show notes about how to find the book and find both of you there. If you have any last thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining me today on The Catholic Mama.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. My final word was that would be that someone, I think it was Hans Urs von Balthasar, said that Jesus is the eternal child of the Father. The eternal child of the Father. So there's something very childlike in him and very childlike in all of us. And I think Jacob's Wood brings that out. It brings the child out in all of us. Thanks so much.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
It's great. It was a blessing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Eileen, Father Dennis. Thank you. And everyone who's listening, everything about Jacob's Wood will be in the show notes. So you can find it there. Thank you for joining us. Until next time.
Don't forget to head over to thecatholicmama.com to get your free copy of How to Talk to Your Kids About God. This handy little ebook will teach you how to broach the topic of God with your children, or how to respond to your kids when they want to talk about God, as well as give you answers to 7 of the trickiest questions about the faith that Christian parents face. You'll love the easy to understand grown-up answers, the pared down but not talked down answers you can share with your kids, plus recommended resources if you'd like to deepen your understanding of the topic. Get yours free at thecatholicmama.com.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.